Welcome, everyone, and thanks for attending our kickoff event of the fall, How Do I Entrepreneur? My name is Naya Abdelgaber, and I'll be your host today, coming to you live from St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. To start today, we would like to acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on the lands where you are located and the Indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territories. We're excited to co-host this event in collaboration with our partnering universities across Atlantic Canada, and these are Cape Breton University, Dalhousie University, Mount St. Vincent University, St. Mary's University, University of New Brunswick, and University of Prince Edward Island. This event is also in partnership with League of Innovators. The League of Innovators is a national Canadian charity supporting the next generation of youth-led startups. The League of Innovators programs are barrier-free and as accessible as possible, meaning they're free, virtual, no equity, no strings attached, as well as sector and business model agnostic. If you haven't already, you can check out the programming after today's event. We're also very excited and grateful to be joined today by our guest speaker, Jason Yee, from a Canadian company, GrantMe. Jason is a co-founder and currently holds the title of Chief Empowerment Officer. He'll be providing more insight on his background and his company in today's talk. You're encouraged to engage with Jason as well by writing questions in the chat, which we'll address once we get to the Q&A session. So let's jump right in and welcome Jason to the stage.
Thanks, Anaya. And so great to meet everyone. I just learned that it is a kind of half virtual, half in-person event. So I'm going to do my best to channel my energy as if I'm there with you in person. And I'd love to see comments and that kind of thing coming through so I can know how you guys are reacting to it.
Awesome. Well, we're very happy to have you here with us, Jason, and I'll now pass the floor over to you.
Awesome. Okay, thanks so much. All right, so I'm seeing Tushar there, Rahul, Caleb, Shashinha. I hope I'm saying your name right, but welcome you guys. Nairuti, thanks so much for joining and thanks so much for attending. And I'm super excited to present this, How to Entrepreneur, How Do I Entrepreneur? And you know, the reason why is because I didn't have a class or a presentation like this. So I really wish that I had this kind of presentation to save myself some headache and maybe some heartache too. So I'll talk a little bit about that and hopefully give you some insight into maybe next steps in your journey. So one thing I always like to start off with is this quote that I really live by, and I've lived by my whole entrepreneurial journey, my whole life really, is absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is uniquely your own. So I did this in business, I did this in my life, and I encourage you to do the same as you're listening to me here, because this is my journey and this is what works for me, but it doesn't necessarily apply to you. But you might get some insights that do apply to you and unlock some doors for you. And that's what I hope. I hope that, you know, you can absorb what is useful from this, but don't stress out too much about you know, if you're doing the right thing, to be honest. And so keep this quote in mind. You know, take a screenshot, take a picture, keep this in mind because I think it's super important for your sanity as an entrepreneur. So I wanted to start there. So what I wanted to talk about today was I want to tell you guys a couple stories. So I want to tell you the embarrassing moment I knew I would become an entrepreneur. Growing up on an island. I grew up on an island, or, you know, I don't know if everyone of you grew up on an island, but I also grew up on an island just on the opposite side of the country. Then I want to talk about all my failures, which is always fun. Then I want to talk about leveraging the internet and my biggest mindset shift, which, you know, led to that. And then I want to talk a little bit about bootstrapping to 7 figures in 3 years, and then you know, do a little Q&A. So we kind of start with my story, and then we'll talk about the biggest mindset shift, and then we'll get into some of the more tactical stuff that maybe you're interested in, and maybe not. But I'll let your guys' questions and answers dictate that. So, and I'm gonna kind of keep an eye on the comments here. So yeah, I'll kind of keep an eye on that just to see how you guys are engaging. And I'm just seeing some comments that it's choppy. How are we doing with broadcast quality? Is there anything I need to change on my end? Okay, it seems like it's maybe on the broadcasting end. Okay. Okay, cool. I'm getting word that it's looking good. So let's get into it. The embarrassing moment I knew I'd become an entrepreneur. So, I want to give a bit of background, which is that, my mom was a teacher, my dad was a government employee. Nothing about my upbringing would predict that I should become an entrepreneur. Like there's nothing in my family or kind of any of my backstory would predict that. But I just for some reason really gravitated towards it. Like you could say there was like people I looked up to in the community that were business people, but there was really no like reason. And books became my mentor because I didn't have any mentors in business. I just really didn't even know where to start. So I walked into our local bookstore and went to the business section and bought a book that caught my eye. And that book was this. So it's kind of an embarrassing first book. I literally walked to the business section and said, this looks like a good business book. And I read it. And I don't think it was the right book necessarily to read as your first business book. But it led me down a trail of reading a lot of books. And so I just wanted to share that because, you can kind of start from anywhere. And even with the wrong books. And I really read a lot of wrong books. But eventually I started to figure out what books, were the right books. And, that was kind of one of my first failures. And I wanted to talk a little bit about some of my other failures that I had. So, and the reason I bring this up is because part of being an entrepreneur means failing a lot. And I've got at least, how many do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, at least 10. This is at least 10 failed business ventures that I had. A lot of really, really bad ideas. And, I had a hockey card stand at the end of my street. Turns out nobody really wanted to buy hockey cards. I had hockey training groups, and I tried to create a website in like 2007. I created an app that was kind of popular amongst 4 people, and I had to shut down. I didn't have to shut down. I think it's maybe still alive, but it's it's not as popular as Facebook, let's say. I created an AI coach, which had no AI at all. I had a hockey training facility that I later closed down. As you might know or might have figured out, I played hockey growing up. I became a sales consultant at one point, a personal trainer, and these were all like my attempts at business, right? And I just wanted to kind of bring that up because success feels like failure, probably because you fail a lot. And what I mean by that is like every day at Grant Me, which is, our my current company, which we can talk about later. It feels like we're failing every single day because every day we're trying to grow. And when you're trying to grow, you're pushing the limits of what was possible yesterday. And when you're doing that by virtue, you're failing every day. And like I said, the reason I bring this up is because when you get started in the entrepreneurial journey, you probably want to get it all right and not fail. But success feels like failure. So if you feel like you're failing every day and you feel like, it's just really, really hard, you're probably doing something right. Okay. And that's really an important thing for entrepreneurs to hear, I think, because I try to tell myself that, and I have mentors and advisors tell me that too. they're like, hey, like you're doing okay. You're doing okay. And we're like, hey, it feels like we're failing. So what I want for you is that when you fail, because you're going to fail as an entrepreneur, you don't give up, or at least you know that this is part of the journey. So I just wanted to give that, little background about, where I started and the amount of failures that I had, just so you know that, I'm human, and so is every entrepreneur that you see that's, in the press and all that kind of stuff. Now, being an entrepreneur is different. I want to be honest with you. I don't want to say like, I know this is the first part of this has been pretty grim, but when you're an entrepreneur, it's a little bit of a different journey, right? You are on your own. There's no safety net or anyone else to blame. And for some, this is liberating, and for others, it's very scary. And for me, it was both. It was both liberating and very scary. But it was, I think, the liberating thing overpowered the scary thing. And I say this because some of you are entrepreneurs, and you're like the liberating thing, the freedom really, really speaks to you. But there's no safety net. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, there comes a point where you need to choose that the liberating piece outweighs the lack of safety net. And that comes back to, fearing failure and embracing it. Because if you can trust yourself to have failures and keep going, you can kind of get through anything. But I just want to be really upfront about that. Now, I want to, I already mentioned that I'm from Vancouver Island, so the opposite side of the country. And, I just wanted to share that, if I can do what I did, and, by the way, GrantMe is now, a multi-million-dollar business. And we've grown a team of we're at about 70 or 80 people now, which, some people might say is like a success. But like I said, for me, I'm like, how can we get better? How can we make things better? And that's why success feels like failure a lot of the time as entrepreneurs. But I just wanted to share, all the failures and my background, because if I can do it, you can too. And here's, the BC ferries, not the Atlantic ferries, but I'm sure you guys are very familiar with ferries, being from Newfoundland. So the why behind why you can do it too, why you can be an entrepreneur today in 2021 is because the internet has leveled the playing field. Whereas before, right, I had no connection to, a more major hub like Vancouver, right, where or Toronto, right? Those are kind of the more commercial hubs. And, Victoria is a government town. There's not a lot of business there. There's not a lot of connections to be had. And so it was really against any odds that I would be able to get into the, get to start a business and grow a business. But today the internet has leveled the playing field. And I think this is a really important thing, because I don't think most people have fully grasped the power of the internet. And so the tools you can use today are massive, right? So, I mean, some people look at Facebook and they're like, hey, that's an evil enterprise. And yeah, there's some things that are not good about it. But it's a massive tool. It can be a massive tool for you. Same with Twitter, right? People are like, oh yeah, Twitter, the time waster, people just mindlessly scrolling. Or it can be a massive tool for you. But then that doesn't even start to talk about some of the things that have really opened the door for you as an entrepreneur to build a business with way less upfront capital, which opens the doors for everyone. And so things like Stripe, if you haven't heard of Stripe, it's a payment processor. It's an online payment processor. And just before Stripe came out, if I go back to one of my nice little failed businesses here, like hockey training group and hockey training facility. I had to apply for a merchant account, and it was the most painful process of my life. It was very painful. I had to do all sorts of things to get a merchant account to process credit cards. And then Stripe came along, and you could literally just type in your bank account information and you had a merchant account just like that. Shopify is like this infrastructure that you can ship. I should probably have thrown Amazon on here, but you can ship anything anywhere. You can build all the commerce functionality. It's all built for you. So, we have to, at GrantMe, we have to custom build our commerce functionality. So our checkouts, our payments, all that stuff, we have to pay developers to do. And, this is something that a company needed to do just to get off the ground transacting, is build their commerce solution and their website and all that kind of stuff. So there's all sorts of things that you can get started with for a low monthly cost, or pay per use, or even free, that can really get you started in your entrepreneurial journey for no capital, if you're resourceful about it. And so that's really what has leveled the playing field is these tools. So, you really have a massive opportunity in front of you. So what I wanted to talk about was one of my biggest mindset shifts as an entrepreneur, because I don't know if you kind of notice a string of failed business ventures, any sort of pattern here, was I either tried things that really relied on me as the business, like hockey coaching, right? Needed me to trade my time for money, and I wasn't scalable. I wasn't something that I could replicate. Same with sales consultant or personal trainer. You're literally, you're literally trading your time for money, and you're in business, but you're not really building a business. And we're going to talk a little bit about lifestyle versus startups in a second. But one of my biggest mindset shifts that allowed GrantMe to scale and to help a lot more students came down to a Twitter, I don't know what you call it, a Twitter thread, a tweet storm is what it's called. And so this is my point with the internet has leveled the playing field. Not only do you have these tools you can use, but you can reach experts that are in the Silicon Valley or Miami, if you believe that Silicon Valley is dead, but you can reach experts all across the world through things like Twitter, through things like Discord. We're chatting right now. I'm across the country. So you can actually connect with experts in a way that you couldn't before. And so that's why the playing field has been leveled. Geographic barriers have been broken down, and you have a phenomenal opportunity as an entrepreneur. My biggest mindset shift came down to this Twitter storm. Thanks for highlighting that tweet storm. I'll kind of piggyback off of Naval here. So this is an account that if you're an entrepreneur, you should probably follow, or if you're kind of thinking about getting into entrepreneurship, you'll want to follow, is this guy named Naval. Now, Naval, I don't even know his background fully, but he's an angel investor. He started AngelList, billionaire kind of philosopher type guy down in the Silicon Valley, thought leader. But he wrote this really great Twitter thread, which really changed my mindset, which I think in Canada is an important mindset shift to have. That Twitter thread goes like this. It's how to get rich without getting lucky. And this is not the full one, by the way. But you can look this up on Twitter. You can just Google how to get rich without getting lucky. And I think one of the most important mindset shifts for me out of this was the third tweet, which is understand that ethical wealth creation is possible. If you secretly despise wealth, it will elude you. Hussam is saying the picture isn't clear. If that's the case, I would just go into Google and type in how to get rich without getting lucky. And Rahul also said Naval is everywhere. Yeah, totally. And thanks, Danish. I appreciate that. But yeah, so the reason I mentioned that about this being one of my biggest mindset shifts is because I think, and I know I don't think it's like 100% across the country, but I think that there's always a concern around, oh, if I build too much wealth, will I kind of get, torn down or attacked? Will they attack me like they attack Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or, name whoever rich person, right? And there's, I mentioned three males, but there's hit pieces on female entrepreneurs all the time, like what's her name, Steph at Away, and the Ty Haney at Outdoor Voices, and Emily Weiss at Glossier, right? So like these entrepreneurs are getting kind of torn down, and I think if you're concerned about that, you're going to have a hard time building a business. And the reason I say that is because I was. And so if you despise wealth, you're going to be in like opposition with yourself, and you're going to be like fighting yourself on every move. And a book that I recommend for this is called The Rational Optimist. And it's basically a history of how commerce and how businesses have really driven a massive increase in the quality of life. And by the way, I'm not saying that like one way is there's one right way to think about the world and one wrong way to think about the world, because wealth and capitalism also leads to a lot of inequality. And there's a lot of problems with it. So I'm not saying it's like the panacea, like it's going to solve everything. But what I am saying is that if you have a mindset of despising wealth and growth and big businesses, then you're just going to be in opposition with yourself. So you just want to be aware of that. And if that's the case, maybe business is not the thing for you. Yeah, Alex, it's The Rational Optimist that by Matt Ridley is the book here. And Renee asked the question, and I'm totally fine if you guys have questions throughout. I don't mind just kind of jumping to them throughout. Renee said here, could I elaborate on the Twitter or the tweet? Pick an industry where you can play long-term games with long-term people. 100%. There is nothing more important than. There's another one too. Oh yeah, it's right down here at the bottom. Pick business partners with high intelligence, energy, and above all, integrity. All the gains in life come from playing long-term games, right? You might have, like a short-term win and, I don't know, make like $100,000 in a year, and by scamming people, right? And I don't know, like there's like a good Amazon scam going around. They're probably doing pretty well. It's really unfortunate because someone on our team got scammed into that and bought like $1,000 worth of Amazon cards or something. But, scams are like, you can make a little bit of money, but it's a short-term game, right? Because you're going to end up in jail. Or you can try a short-term game and you're going to burn bridges with people. And yeah, okay, you might make a little bit of money in year 1 or year 2. But all the gains in life, like ethical wealth creation, comes from playing long-term games. I'm talking 10, 15, 20-year time horizons. And if you're working with people with high integrity, high energy, who are positive, who are optimistic with you, you're going to be able to like continue learning with them, right? But if you're playing games with like status seekers, other people who are trying to play short-term games, yeah, there might be a short-term win, but it also could be a short-term loss, and you're not actually building wealth, right? You're not actually building something for the long term. And by the way, all of this Twitter thread, Naval himself actually elaborates on it in a podcast as well. So, you know, you can just type in Naval on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Play or whatever you use, and you can go deeper into that. But kind of getting back to it, like that was my biggest mindset shift, because I was very concerned about growing a big business, because I didn't want to be, you know, taken down, so to speak, and I didn't want to create inequality. I didn't want to create you know, more problems in society, and because of that conflict with myself, I couldn't grow successful businesses. I really ended up being quite selfish about it, because I wanted to do everything myself. When I had this mindset shift and I realized that, and you know, the where is it here? It's you will get rich by giving society what it wants, but does not yet know how to get at scale. And that was like a big eye opener for me, because I realized that what we were doing one-to-one with students, like what Madison, my co-founder, was doing one-to-one with students, could be scaled using technology. And if it was scaled using technology, then we could actually help a lot more students, you know, navigate scholarships, navigate their admissions process, than if it was just her doing it alone. So once I kind of had that mindset shift and realized that growing the business was actually good for the world, then things started to really transform. So, like I said, I'm not saying that this is the way you need to think about the world. But what I'm saying is, like, if your goal is to grow a big business or to generate wealth, then you need to have your mindset aligned with that. So that was my biggest mindset shift. And I hope that gives you some insight. Now, getting a bit into the more tactical, like how we bootstrapped, and I'll talk a little bit about, you know, fundraising, because I think that's often a really hot topic, and especially the way the VC world is right now, like, and how low interest rates are. There's a lot of money chasing startups, and you know, I think it's worth kind of having a discussion about. So I'll tell you, like, exactly tactically how we did this, and then like I said, we'll kind of go into a Q&A. So what we started with was we sold a quote unquote high ticket consulting product, which was really just Madison. And so Madison's my co-founder and fiance, and she's an amazing human, and really complements me in a lot of ways. We're kind of opposites, but similar. And she started this whole thing, and I kind of came in to help with, you know, with adding the technology and adding the strategy and some of the different mindsets that were needed to scale. So as I already talked about, I had a ton of failures. So I'd learned from experience, you know, what not to do. So when we came in and started to grow GrantMe, it was smoother sailing, let's just say. So we started with selling a high ticket consulting product, okay, which was really Madison sitting down with students and families and saying, hey, here's how I can help you get into, you know, XYZ school. I can edit your applications with you, and I'll make sure to give you a list of scholarships and help you apply to those scholarships. And what this did was parents and students just didn't say no to her. And I was shocked, right? Because remember, I'm like trying to like grow these hockey businesses. And I was like, you know, kind of struggling, to be honest. Like, it was a battle, and no one said no to her. No one said no. They'd come in, they'd sit down with her, and she'd be like, all right, the cost for me to serve you for the year is, I think at the time it was like $800. And everyone's just like, all right, like, where do I pay? Where do I sign up? And I was like shocked. I was like, my goodness, like, this is like, I don't believe this. And then so what we started to do was we started to use SaaS software to automate. So at first they would just email her, you know, their essays, and she'd edit them and send them back. Then I got us to create a like like a form submission on a website, and then I set up Stripe to collect payments, and then I got all the edits to happen through Google Docs. And so Madison had that industry expertise, like the ability to help a student, and then I was able to kind of layer on the different softwares to scale. And then we were growing so fast, we were like, you know, what should we do with this money? And we're like, should we just save it? Should we go on a trip? Like, what do we do? And we're like, oh, well, you know, we should reinvest it. And so, you know, part of like the initial product was we gave students a list of scholarships on a Google Sheets. And so we're like, wouldn't it be cool if we could build an app? And so we built an app. And so we called up one of my developer friends, and he's actually our engineering manager now. He was working part-time at the time. He was a ref in the WHL, Western Hockey League. And he's like, yeah, I can build you an app. So he built an app, and so everything that we were doing kind of manually through all these different softwares now was in one central place. And then we got good at sales. Good question, Florian. SaaS software, software as a service. So software as a service, and this is kind of what I was talking about here with some of these companies, is you got to remember that, like, literally to start a company previously, you would have to either get a merchant account, and then you'd have to like design and build your own payment solution, right? And like I said, we literally have to pay our developers. We've probably invested like at least a couple $100,000 into just our payments. Okay. Whereas a company like Shopify or Stripe, they've already built it. They've taken that upfront capital, and then they've built a business model where you can pay monthly to access their software. So that's what software as a service is. And that's part of kind of going back to leveraging the internet, right? The internet has leveled the playing field. So you can use software and all these tools that other companies have invested hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into making really great. And you can use it for a really low cost. And that allows you to get started. Where did it go here? I'm going to say something. Oh, yeah. One of the critical tools you should use is Zapier. So Zapier is like it's an API. And what that means is it's an application programming interface. It allows SaaS software to talk to other SaaS software. So for example, we have like if you have something like HubSpot, which is a CRM, customer relationship management software, it's a database of all your customers, and you want that to update a Google Sheet. You can actually use Zapier to connect to Google, and you can do that without any code. So you don't need to know any code. You just need to know how to like think logically. And if you can like connect those things together, you can set up automations that run while you sleep. It's a beautiful thing. And that's kind of what we did with GrantMe, was we used all this SaaS software as a service software, which was low cost, low upfront cost for us to automate things that we were doing. And then because we had the profit, we were able to reinvest that, automate the value delivery. So we didn't have to like always update all the Google Sheets because we created one database for the scholarships in the schools. And then that was always accessible by students. Then we got good at sales. So we learned kind of the tips and tricks. And I think a lot of product-focused founders think sales is like a dirty word and don't want to get good at it. But if you want to grow a business, you have to get good at sales. So we did that early, and Madison is a lot better than me at that. And she's got a lot more gumption and is like much more egoless than me. So she wasn't afraid to ask dumb questions and just talk to people. So, I mean, maybe another lesson in that is get a good co-founder who compliments you. My ego is much more fragile, so I don't like rejection. She's not afraid of that. So you or someone in your company needs to get good at sales, and she was really good at sales. And then we got good at paid ads. So I hope that you've been served a Grant Me ad at some point, because that's our goal, is to meet a lot of students and introduce students to Grant Me through paid ads. We've got pretty good at them. There's a lot of systems we could talk about for that, but I won't get too deep into that. And the reason paid ads is that it's like much more controllable. And you can like directly measure the return on investment on it. And this is, remember my first quote: absorb what's useful, discard what's useless, add what's uniquely your own. This is just what worked for us. And then we always ensured that we made a profit. So we just like, we weren't super sophisticated at bookkeeping, but we're like, we just know we don't want to run out of money. So we can keep growing and keep serving our students. So we just always made sure of that, because it was just mine and Madison's seed money that went into the company, nothing else. And so we always made sure we had that. And then we started building up a team. Like I said, we're now at about 70 or 80 people. And then we started focusing on our brand, and then we started honing our operations. So that's kind of like high level what we did. But I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the order we did it in, because I think a lot of people think of, honing operations first or building a brand first. And it's going to depend on the type of startup or company you're trying to build. But, that's just how we did it. But I think I wanted to share that because I think it's different. And so I just want to give you a unique viewpoint. Okay, so there's a couple questions here that I'm thinking I might just jump into. The other couple, and Naya, and feel free to like cut me off here and make sure that I'm not talking over here. So feel free to jump in. But I'm thinking that I might actually start answering questions, because this is kind of where we're at here. So the first question I wanted to get to, and Anaya, just jump in and interrupt me and cut me off if you need to. But I wanted to answer this. Where was it here? Talk about how to register a freelance business in Canada, any costs involved. Now, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an accountant, so you want to like take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But I think that you can just get started. But then when you go to file your taxes, you would do it you would just say, hey, here's some self-employed income. But you want to talk to an accountant about that. So like for example, when I started my, various businesses, I just started, and, I opened a business bank account, I incorporated, and then I just started. And then I figured out, okay, in order to get verified for this, I needed to get a business license here. And in order to pay taxes, I had to do this, that, and the other. But my best advice is to like get started. And the reason I say that is because just to be clear, there will be a headache later, because you will have to do some stuff to clean things up. So like I did that. I just started my businesses, and then now I'm kind of like, I just kind of cleaned up some of my businesses from like a tax perspective and like a registration perspective. But I would say that sometimes people use that part of the process to like as an excuse not to get started. And so my advice would be to get started, and then there's nothing that you can't sort out on the back end. If CRA comes at you and says, what's up with this income, you just say like, yeah, this was from my business, and then you might have to pay taxes on it. So keep, that's kind of the risk. The other risk is you want to make sure that you have the right insurance in place. If you're doing something risky, like, as a personal trainer, there's a lot of risk, because someone could, literally like, be injured or die or something under your care. So you needed to have the right insurance for that. But if you're just like, I don't know, doing like logos or copywriting, there's probably not a lot of risk to that. But those are just probably the things to be aware of. So yeah, there's kind of some after the cost facts. And Naya, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, so first of all, I wanted to thank you so much for the inspiring story. And I'm just here to help facilitate the Q&A. So as you can see, we have a few questions in the chat already. And I'm here to remind everyone again that if you have any questions, whether you're attending online or in person, just submit your question in the chat section and we'll post them as we can. And I have one question that I wanted to pose. It's not in the chat, but I wanted to pose it before we get into the more detailed questions. And my question is, what was the most valuable piece of advice that you were given through your entrepreneurial journey?
It's hard because there's a lot. I'd say it's just believe in yourself. And I know it's like, that's super corny. And I know it's like super, super corny, but by nature, I'm very hard on myself. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. I'm sure a whole bunch of you are like hard on yourselves and critical. And that can eat you up because it goes back to the failure thing, right? If you fail, you're like, oh my goodness, like, am I a failure? And like, will I ever be good at business? Ever? And it's like, you know what? You're probably going to bounce back. Like, if you look at your life, if you got to this point, there's probably a number of setbacks that you had to overcome. And so you can probably overcome the next one. It might not feel like it, but you can probably overcome it. And so, kind of like fairly recently, we've had some advisors and mentors be like, hey, like, you guys know that you're doing like okay in business, right? And Madison and I are like, no. We're like, we feel like we're really failing here. And they're like, no, like, you've grown a business that kind of exceeds what most businesses do. And we're like, we have a hard time believing it, to be honest. And that is like mentally challenging and emotionally challenging. So that would probably be the most important piece of advice that I've received that's like coming up to me right now. Yeah.
Well, that sounds good. And for me, it makes sense because I'm also someone who could be a little hard on themselves sometimes. And I know this is a quote that probably everyone heard of, but you are your own worst critic.
100%.
So 100, yeah, definitely. So definitely it's believe in yourself and keep persevering and keep going.
Totally.
Okay. So we have a question here. One of the audience is asking, how do you test the market before actually working on an idea? If it's a virtual service, like an app, for example.
Yeah, I think there's a really great book. So I'm going to answer another question, which is, what book do you recommend? If you have a question, feel free to send me an email, by the way, jason@grantme.ca, really easy email. If you have a question about, a stage that you're at, feel free to email me. I might not get back to you right away, as I've got a lot of emails in my inbox right now, but I will get back to you. And I always have like a book for like every thing, because I read a lot. So like specifically the book, Amen, that I would recommend is Running Lean by Ash Maurya, I think is what it's called. And it's just this way to really, really test ideas in a super lean way. And the whole idea with like the lean startup is that you just don't spend a bunch of time building something that nobody wants. And so you got to get really resourceful in testing what people want. And the best way to test is you can do all the customer interviews you want, you can do all the focus groups you want. The best way to test is to see if people will pay money for it. And that's kind of what spoke to me about GrantMe, was that, like I said, Madison was doing this consulting and nobody said no. Everyone wanted to pay, and it didn't actually matter what she charged. And so that to me had my radar go off. I was like, there is an opportunity here. There's a need that's not being solved right now by the current school system. And this needs to be solved. So if someone is like exchanging money and willing to exchange money for your solution, that's when you have a great idea. So like you should like default to charging money for things right up front as much as possible, because if someone's not willing to put their wallet where their mouth is, it's probably not that big of a need. Because everyone, by the way, as an entrepreneur, everyone's conscious of your feelings. So if you're like, hey, I want to create an Apple Watch competitor, but it only goes on your ankle or something, and all your friends and family are going to be like, oh, that's a great idea, like, yeah, like, good for you. But like if you're like, okay, and give me $500 for it, they'd be like, let me think about it. So you got to actually use what people say, or sorry, what people do, which is give you money to validate if the need is actually there or not. So that would be what I would do. And I would see what you can test like in the real world before building any sort of software, because software is expensive and there's an opportunity cost to that, because you're going to put a bunch of time into it and energy into it. So see if you can come up with creative ways to validate and see if people will pay money for it on some level, or at least, sorry, and I shouldn't say just money, but like, or take action, right? Like if you're to be like, hey, if there's the choice between words and action, you always want to default to observing the action. Hope that makes sense.
Awesome. And another question is, how would you recommend running a business? Should you have it as a side job or turn it into full-time?
There's what I did and there's what I recommend. And that goes back to everyone's on their own journey. So what I did was I just ran businesses full-time. I was like, I don't think I'm super employable. I to be honest, like, and so I was like, I just can't work for someone else. I had a bad experience where I was working for someone else and then he had financial troubles and couldn't pay me for one summer. And hence I had to go into student debt that year. Like I literally just didn't get paid for a summer's worth of work. And since then I was like, I never want to have that situation occur again, even though it's kind of a long shot. And I was like, I want to have my fate in my hands. And so I did that, but I don't think everyone should do that. I think that there's definitely the opportunity to, work your 9-to-5 job, so to speak, and tinker and test ideas. And then when that thing scales beyond your 9-to-5 job, well, then you switch over your time. I think that's probably like the most sensible approach. But if you're like me and you're like, you just got to do it, then you should do that. But you really got to look at where you're at in life, because for me at the time, I would think I was 22 or 24 or something. But if you have a mortgage and, a family that depends on you, then I would probably recommend a different course of action.
Awesome. And there are 2 more questions here. Actually, we have a lot of questions, so I'm trying to get through them.
I'll try to go quick.
Yeah, so there are 2 questions that we can combine together, I guess. And it's, how can I come with a good business idea? And how do I know that my current business idea is good?
How do I come up with a good business idea? It's called if you type in the idea maze by I won't say his name right. It's Balaji Srivasanan or something. Stanford professor. He talks about the idea maze, and I'm wondering, and what he talks about with the idea maze is that there's like a gajillion ideas, but you have to filter those ideas through action, right, and testing. And so you should really just like look at all the different possible ideas out there and test them. And by testing them, some will go further through the idea filter than others. And so I'll just repeat that for you guys. It's the idea maze by, I'm going to search this right now. Idea maze by Balaji Srinivasan. So that's a good one for you all to look at for coming up with ideas and testing ideas.
Okay, perfect. And we have a question here. Did you accept investments from VCs or investors? And if so, did you fear losing control after receiving the first investment?
Yeah, can you guys see my slide here? I was anticipating this question. So we bootstrapped. The reason that we were able to bootstrap is because we had what's called a negative cash conversion cycle. We were paid upfront for services rendered. And then we only had to pay our vendors, right? Like our team later, right? So we always had more cash than we had expenses. The reason you should, so when we wanted to grow, we just needed to, sell and market more, and always ensure there was a positive ROI. And we were able to grow 300% year over year because of that. We maintain full control of the company. We have no one else on the cap table other than an options pool for employees. And yes, we feared a couple of things. With VC, we feared that we would have less control at the board level, and we also feared that we didn't have a ton of conviction. We have more conviction now, but we didn't have a ton of conviction that Grammy could be at what's called venture scale, so kind of an outcome of like 50 to say 200 million in revenue and up. And there's like, I won't go too deep into it, but when you have venture money, there's an expectation of growth, and that can sometimes harm the company because when you're expected to grow, you might grow faster than you have product market fit. And we were afraid of that. And so we chose to bootstrap because we were afraid of that. We didn't have to give up control, so we chose not to, and we had enough cash to fund growth. Venture is usually designed to give you cash to grow ahead of sales or ahead of like actually getting that cash flow in. And I'm generalizing at a very high level because there's all sorts of use cases for it, but that was just some of the drivers that led to our decision.
Okay, and we have time for one more question, and then I'll be cluing up after that. But how did you look for co-founders, and why did they want to join your business at an early stage?
Well, I was very lucky, right? Like my co-founder is my fiance, so we kind of got forced into that one. So yeah, but I think maybe like to rephrase the question and like early employees or co-founders, you want to look for people that complement your skills, right? I'm a long-term thinker. Madison's more like short-term operationally oriented. She's more egoless and more like relentless than I am. I'm a bit more easygoing. There's all sorts of like complementary things we have, but we were united together on like a common vision, and like we had some common values. And she's trustworthy and and a good person and a good character. And so those are the other early employees that we found too. It was like people that were trustworthy, had complementary skill sets, and were just fantastic. So that's what I would look for, is look for people that have complementary skill sets, not just your friends, right? They have to have complementary skill sets to you. And people that, you would like, it's so important, people that you trust, like people that you just trust. And so don't, like, if you have a choice between bringing on someone that you don't trust or going slower, go with going slower, right? Like, don't start, especially in the early days, with someone that you don't trust and that you don't have a good relationship with, because it's not going to, like, doing the business is not going to make things better. So index on that, and not all of you will do that, and that's fine. But if I were starting again, I would make sure that we had the exact same composition that we did, which was trust and good character. Such a boring answer, and you hear it all the time, but it's like so true.
Well, if that's what works, it might be boring, but repetition will get people to know that this is what
100%.
For sure. Well, Thank you so much, Jason, for joining us today and sharing your knowledge with our future entrepreneurs. And today we had excellent questions, engagement, and discussion. And there are still a few questions that unfortunately we didn't get to answer. But as Jason mentioned, you can email him at jason@grantme.ca with any of your questions, and he'll get back to you. So thanks again to the League of Innovators for your partnership on this event. And to everyone who joined us today, we welcome you to stay and continue networking. The online platform will remain open until 2 p.m. Newfoundland time. So just hit the networking tab on your Hop Inside panel and you'll get to network with someone there. So connect, ask questions, and potentially find your company co-founder. Don't forget to contact your entrepreneurial center to book a meeting and find support and funding for your entrepreneurial journey. Each university can add their contact info in the event chat. Enjoy the rest of networking, and we'll see you back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.